So you can see on your screen now is the outline of today's lecture. Well, the purpose of today's lecture is really to have a brief introduction of what is development, particularly what are the major development concepts, what does development mean, who are the major development actors, and also a little bit about the origin of development. So if you look at the outline, I'm really trying to look at development from three different perspectives today. The first one is development as an idea. So what does the idea of development entail? And also look a little bit at sustainable development and what does it actually mean. And I also want to look at development as a technical profession. So this is to look at how development are using different sort of technical languages to talk about different indicators and different measure of those indicators in achieving development. And then the third perspective I have here is to look at development as an industry, right? So who are the people donating to support the whole development? Who are the people running development? And how many people and how many organizations are involved in this international development world? So this is one perspective that I want you to look at as well. And then at the end of the lecture today, I will talk a little bit about the origin of development, which is actually very related to the United States Point 4 program under the President Truman. So what is development? So I kind of went to this Oxford Learner's Dictionary and type in development to see what the website would tell me. And as you can see on the screen, it says that development is the steady growth of something so that it becomes more advanced, stronger, etc. And then the example given here is a baby's development in the womb. In the international development world, however, development is sort of an idea that people and societies need active development, that they should change themselves in a systematic and planned manner to achieve a better stage. So if this is an idea, it is quite a widespread idea, as you can see from our quite common vocabularies of developing versus developed countries. So people have used different terms over time, which they think might be more appropriate, such as the first world versus the third world, the industrialized versus the industrializing, the high income versus the middle income or low income. But the connotations are pretty much there when we talk about first world, or when we talk about developed countries, or we talk about the high income countries. We imagine the same groups of countries. And similarly, we imagine the same groups of countries when we talk about developing countries or third world countries. So you can see that it is often a quite rigid categories, I would say here. And then it is somewhat related to income, technology, and infrastructure, right? So you hardly talk about countries which is super developed religiously or spiritually to be developed. For example, I never heard people talking about Bhutan being a developed country, but they are very sort of admired worldwide for their spirituality, because they defined the country's happiness as the most important indicators. And in the last 3 decades, another very common development indicators is the Human Development Index, which basically comprises the GNI, which is the gross national income, life expectancy, and education. So this is a little bit better than just referring to income, because it talks about, how long one's live and how much education one's pursue. And so I'm trying to ask the question, is development a hegemonic idea? What do I mean by that is that it seems like for many societies and people, people really take the idea of development as granted, that, is naturally for everyone and every society to want development. And the kind of development they're talking about are income, infrastructure, and technology. So this is pretty much widely accepted and never really very much debated in many parts of the world. So this slide is to show you that the sector of international development really perpetuates this idea of developed versus developing countries, right? So what I'm showing you here is a list by the United Nations of least developed countries, LDCs, which actually lists down 24 countries. Let's look at it here. So you have Afghanistan to Zambia in the end. So the idea of listing down this country is actually for people to target this country for development aid, for development assistance. But still, it has put all these countries into a category of least developed countries, right? And what they mean by that is usually they have very low income, low life expectancy, low education, and that's the standard indicators they use. Okay, so this is another map I found on the World Bank website, and World Bank is another really major international development actor today. And you can see that the World Bank has divided the world to different income levels, right? If you look at the red and the orange color, which is kind of concentrated around the equatorial lines, those are the countries with less income, right? And then the blue, dark blue colors are those countries with higher income. Okay, so in the recent decades, the term sustainable development becomes really common and really popular. Everyone is talking about it. So is it a new idea compared to development, which has a few decades of history? So I'm incorporating here a kind of a famous diagram when the term sustainable development was being introduced. So this diagram tries to explain sustainable development as the overlapping areas between environmental concern, economic concerns, and social concern, right? So the yellow color parts, the overlapping part of it is sustainable development, where you equally pay attention to three different sectors of human well-being, right? So this diagram has been quite commonly criticized, and we will talk about it next week when we talk about sustainability and the criticism related to it. But for now, I just want to briefly introduce you to this concept. And the most famous definition of sustainable development, maybe some of you have already heard, is from the Brundtland Report by the United Nations in 1992. And I quote here, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Okay, though sustainable development has been actually discussed since 1992, but the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDG, or the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, were really only embraced by all 193 countries of the world since 2015. And this is the website showing the Sustainable Development Goals, which I asked you to visit as part of the class readings. And you can see here in the preamble of the Sustainable Development Goals, I quoted a specific sentence here that we are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure the planet. So we are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path. So this is the preamble. So it is kind of suggesting that what sustainable development is trying to achieve is a little bit different from the conventional development idea. But is it? So it talks about poverty and it talks about planetary health. So I think the addition here is the planetary health, because poverty has been always the objective of development, because we are always focusing on countries with low income, right? Okay, so when we say sustainable development, what do we mean, right? So this is the banner of sustainable development goals that you can pretty much see everywhere in the world nowadays, but particular in countries where there are a lot of development assistance, like in Nepal, where I used to work in. So you can see this everywhere, it's ubiquitous. So what are they trying to develop using these 17 goals? So I have asked you to look at the website. Hopefully you have browsed through them and look at the different things that were incorporated in the goals. So you can see that they are kind of conventional indicators like no poverty, no hunger, and conventional social indicators like quality education, gender equality. But there are also kind of a lot of more new kind of development indicators like sustainable cities and consumptions, climate actions, life below water, life on land, etc. Right? So I think Sustainable Development Goals is a really good snapshot and good overview of what development is about today. So when you say that we are doing development, or when we talk about international development, what does the sector really do? So if you're doing anything that can be, categorized into any of these goals, it can be considered development, at least from the year 2015 to 2030, where countries around the world pledged to advance themselves towards these different goals. But I would like you to take a moment and think whether, in your opinion, these goals are bold and transformative as the preamble claims. Right. Okay, now we have arrived to our first interlude.
Now we have arrived.
So interlude is my
to our
imagine
interactive section.
So
with
interlude
all,
is my imagine interactive section. So basically, there are three purposes of this interlude. The first is for you to take a break from listen to me babbling all the time,
for you to take a break
and have some
listen
time
to me babbling all the time
for yourself,
and have some
to
time
write down your
think,
thoughts.
for yourself,
And
to
then
write down
the
your thoughts.
purpose of this
right?
interview is really to help
And then
you
the second,
think about what purpose of this interview is really to help you
reflection,
think about
which is
what
one
to
of
write
your assignment
discussion.
So
forum
this
reflection,
interview provides
which is
some
one of your assignment.
tentative ideas.
So
or
this
tentative,
interview provides
prompt
some
for you to write down
tentative
those
ideas
reflections,
or tentative
well, you don't have to
prompt for
actually
you
use
to
them,
write down those
but
reflections.
it is there if you
Well,
need
you
them,
don't
right?
have to actually use them,
And
but
then
it is there
the third
if you need
purpose
them,
is
right?
really for me to
And
have a reference
the
on
third
what
purpose
can
is
we
really
discuss
for
about
me
during
to
our
have a
synchronous
reference
discussion
on what
section,
can we discuss
which
about
we will
during
meet
our
every
synchronous
Tuesday from 12 to
discussion
1:30.
section, which we will meet
Okay,
every Tuesday
so,
from 12 to 1:30.
The first questions I have in my first
Okay,
interview
so
is,
look at
the
the
first
17
questions
goals.
I have in my first interview
Which goals will you
look at the
prioritize
17
and why?
goals. Is there
Which
anything
goals will you
else you would like to
prioritize
see
and
there?
why? So
Is
take
there
as much
anything
time
else
as you
you would
want,
like to see
and
there?
this would be the
So take
end
as
of
much
the
time
first
as you
part
want,
of,
and this
my first
would be the
lecture, but
end
they are
of the
also
first
second
part
parts and
of,
third parts. My first lecture, but they are also second parts and third parts. So take as long as you need now before you go on to the second part of the lecture.